So my name is Angela Gichaga. I am a love of life. I am keen on ensuring that young people, and especially young women on the continent, get opportunities to help in the development of the continent. I had many past lives. I've been a doctor in my past. I've been a civil servant. I've been in academia. I have worked in private sector. I have built my own entities as well and built with other people. I wear many hats, and I actually enjoy wearing many hats. I was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. I was born to civil servant parents and so had a comfortable life. We moved around a lot as my parents were transferred from post to post, but spent a lot of my childhood growing up and learning in Kenya. And primary school in Nairobi, high school, went to a national high school, very eye-opening for very many reasons. And that was my early years. I always wanted to be a doctor. I mean, there are circumstances here and there. I was like, okay, teaching, marine biologist. Again, a lot of the things you watch on TV influences you, but really the mainstay from a very early age, I think from 6 years of age, I told my parents I wanted to be a doctor. Of course, my mom was in the health sector. I found it very fascinating. And then I had an uncle who at that time was working for the flying doctors. I didn't really understand his background very well, and so I thought, oh, I would love to be a flying doctor, because when he would come to visit us, he would tell us amazing stories of how he went to Turkana and they were doing a camp under a tree, and I found that very fascinating. And so I wanted to be a flying doctor when I was much younger. My parents were very open-minded. They were way ahead of their times. Looking back now and just seeing how the way they thought and the way they brought us up was quite instrumental in how I perceive the world to be and how I show up in the world. So I was called to the School of Medicine, but at that time, there was a waiting period, and again, I've always been like, what am I waiting for? Why must I wait for 2 years? And of course, again, at that time, you've done everything. You've gone and done accounting, you've started doing French, and I'm a very curious person, and I ask many questions and I challenge a lot. And I do think there's also an aspect of my parents trying to figure out, okay, we cannot have this in the house for 2 years. We need to find a way to get this person to go study. So I end up attending the School of Medicine, University of Nairobi, and that was a shocker. It's interesting because before I went to medical school, and I'll backtrack. Again, I said I had the opportunity to learn, and I performed really well, both in primary and high school. I've always wanted to be a doctor. And I remember when we were still choosing subjects, my parents were like, oh, I mean, yes, but, is there anything else you want to do? Medical school is hard, And again, to the point you raised earlier, I am scientifically minded, but I'm also very creative and I love having fun. And so for my parents, it was just that trying to bring the worlds together of, is there anything else in case you don't do medicine? What else can you do? But I was so laser focused, and I said, no, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to spend my life. At the time, I thought, you start university before your friends, then they come into university, they finish, they start working, and you're literally still reading, and that takes, it's something else. But it's interesting because after graduation, I did my internship, and for someone who had always wanted to be a doctor since I was 6 years old, it's interesting that internship definitely squashed my passion for medicine. I do think that there's something to be said around just not availing the right resources in the context. So your few medical personnel you're stretched too much, there's not enough equipment, you're in a public hospital, the volumes of patients are so high. And I realized that the more, as the year was going through internship, and I loved theater, and I'd always, when I was in medical school, I said, okay, great, when I'm done here, I'll probably do surgery. And so my goal was to just go work outside for 2 years, come back, become a surgeon, and continue. But I mean, 1 year in internship, and I was like, no, this is not for me. It's not for me because I didn't like the fact that I'd spent so much time gaining the knowledge and practicing the skill, and then I get into a setting where I have the knowledge but I don't have the equipment to do what I'm supposed to do, or I don't have the resources, or by the time I'm seeing my 100 patients, in the clinic, I'm so tired, I'm not eating, I'm not giving the patient the kind of time I want because I'm trying to clear the queue. I found myself being desensitized, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that, people come to the health facility and, they're not at their best, right? And they're looking for your help, they're looking for your support, and they deserve your attention, they deserve your care, and they deserve you listening to them and giving your best. And I felt that in the setting that I was in, I wasn't able to give my best, not because of necessarily me not wanting to give my best, but just the system just did not support me to give my best. So internship was good because, again, you get to do a number of things. You help deliver patients, you do cesarean sections, you do surgeries, you remove appendices, you do the whole gambit. And then there's a phenomena that we used to call exodus, right? And what exodus was at that time when you graduated from medical school, before you got your medical license, you had to do, of course, internship, right? And you had to do it in a government-approved center. And then once you get your license, then you could practice in government and you could practice outside. And because at that time there were only, I think, 2 accredited medical schools in the country, and the classes were not as big, by the time you're graduating, like private sector, hospitals and pharma are just there. They're waiting for you to get that license and then give you opportunities. And so exodus used to happen when now after internship, everyone has gotten their license, people get jobs and they leave the public sector. And potentially because one, my parents were civil servants, and 2, the frustration I felt in internship really made me think, okay, what needs to happen so that this changes? Who is making the decisions to influence the availability or lack thereof of the resources in this setting? And so I had offers, of course, as everyone at that time would have, but I chose to stay in government. And of course, again, what used to happen at that time is after you graduate, the government posts you far, and then most of the times for a group of people, your career is about trying to get closer to the center, either a major town or a city. Like, you start far and then you start working your way towards the city. So at that time we were still a unicameral system, and so I was posted to Eastern Province. So when I got the opportunity to connect with the provincial director for medical services, Eastern Province, I asked for an audience, and when I met him, I told him, look, I'm not looking to get clinical experience mainly. I think there's a challenge with the public system, and I believe there are ways in which we can work to make government hospitals more efficient and effective. And I told him, it's fine, I am a doctor and I will see patients, but I wanted an opportunity to be exposed to decision making, and also the opportunity to plan for resources, to be able to plan for people, to be able to plan for budgets. So essentially I asked, for the opportunity to run a hospital. And initially, there were concerns because I was young. But again, the history of how I was brought up and my parents teaching us how to speak up and make the case for ourselves. I'm grateful that I was very convincing, and he also was willing to take a chance on me. And he said, okay, there's one hospital, there are a bit of challenges there. I'm going to give you this opportunity to run that hospital, and I'll give you this amount of time. I'll see how you're settling in. If it works, wonderful. If it doesn't, then I'll probably post you somewhere else. And so I got posted to a hospital on the slopes of Mount Kenya in Meru. And it was an interesting posting. When I was sent to this hospital, the drama of getting there, I had already, the journey starts, and it was a long journey to even get to Meru. And I get to Meru, and it's already late. I think it was around 4 or 5, and the hospital administrator was waiting for me in the town for a few hours. And he's like, okay, now you're here. And I'm like, okay, I was told, yeah, the hospital is in Meru. I thought it was like, okay, it's in the town. And it's like, oh, no, we have to travel to where the hospital is. And so we had to take a public transport because the hospital vehicle was not working. And so at that time there wasn't, like the minivans that would go there, right? So, and it was a dust road, and it was a rural area. And so it was those people, the old Peugeot vehicles, and that used to be used like for public transport. So the individual tells me, okay, go in and come in and sit down. So I sit next to the driver, thinking, okay, fine, I'm here, only to discover that as I'm sitting, someone opens the front, the co-driver seat, and I'm like, okay, what do you want? And he's like, madam, move. And I'm like, to go where? And he's like, no, and this seat sits 3 people. And I was like, how does the co-driver sit 3 people? To move from Marytown to, at that time, Githongo. And so, of course, I'm not even comfortable in the car. And then I'm like, okay, at least, fine, we are too many people in the car. This is against traffic rules, but at least we're on tarmac. Not knowing that 2 minutes later, we turn off tarmac and we're on a dusty road. And we're driving, and we're stopping, and dust is coming in, and someone disembarked, and someone came in with their chicken, and I'm just like, what is going on? So I'm really getting worked up, right? I'm trying to remain calm, but I could tell that the hospital administrator was looking at me because he was sitting in the back seat from the rear view mirror. And he kept telling me, we're so happy you're here. We've been waiting for you for a long time. You're the one who's going to come and help us. We have so many things we want to do. And during this journey, I've already made my decision that this is just, it's not going to work. And so I get to the hospital, and I get to the gate. And remember, in the car, I've already decided, this is not my life. This is not on brand. This just doesn't work for me. And I get to the gate of the hospital, and I walk in, and I felt the conviction that this is where I'm meant to be. And I'm like, no. It's like, God, no. Did I hear you properly? Are you wrong frequency? So then the hospital administrator walks me around. This is the department. This is what we're trying to do. This was a construction that started, that stopped, no resources, walking me around. And every single place in the hospital I kept going to, I kept hearing confirmation over confirmation that this is where I was meant to be. Because there's another thing I've learned in leadership is the role comes with its responsibilities. In any leadership role you're given, and your responsibility, your mandate is to deliver your responsibilities, but every leadership role has a purpose, and the purpose is not the same as just the role and the responsibility. It's much bigger. And so I told God, okay, I need you to tell me what my purpose is in this hospital. What is it that you want me to do here? So I came back to Nairobi, and I had the odious task of turning down the 2 job offers I had at the back of my mind, not knowing, is this the right thing? Am I making a mistake? What if this is the wrong thing? What if it wasn't God? What if I had my own things? What if, I had so many questions. And I said, God, give me peace. Because God, the will of God and his decisions are clarity and peace. And I said, okay, God, if this is your will, give me peace. And I slept and I woke up the next morning and I had peace. And I said, okay, this is the will of God. So I turned down the job offers and I make arrangements and I relocate to Meru. And I can strongly say that decision to remain and serve in government has been one of the most critical decisions in my life more broadly, but in my career for sure. When you talk about defining moments, the choice to stay is a huge defining moment in the trajectory of my career. And that helped me fully understand the government and how the government works. Started with running the hospital and became a district medical officer of health, so overseeing a number of health facilities, and growing through the ranks until I got to the national headquarters in Nairobi. And basically that was really widening my perspective around not just the clinical services, because as the only doctor, of course, you still have to see patients, you still have to deliver clinical services, but really around, being able to managing budgets. You're an AIE holder, you have authority to incur expenditure on behalf of the government. You oversee plans and strategies, you oversee teams directly, the ones in the hospital that you're in, and multiple teams spread across multiple facilities. From Githongo, got an additional posting. Again, the additional posting was to Garbatula, and in Garbatula that was more on the northern part of the country. It's still eastern, but it's eastern north. Again, completely different context. Meru was rural, green, fertile. Food was plenty, and so the kind of challenges that the people in the community had there was different. Garbatula was ASAL, arid and semi-arid area, a nomadic community. They moved around, very little presence of private sector, only mostly government, and then of course a lot of the INGOs, realizing that we build and invest in brick and mortar facilities, and building health facilities are really needed, with the equipment and the personnel. But the truth is, there are barriers to access to these brick and mortar facilities, social barriers, cultural barriers, physical barriers in terms of distance, financial barriers in terms of cost. And the barriers to access of healthcare were really drawn down to me and became very obvious when I was working in Garbatula, because the nomadic community would move, and they would move with their goats and their camels, and there are seasons where we barely saw any patients, because the people have moved with their livestock to look for pasture, and they're still giving birth. The children still need immunizations. Their women still need to be supported in giving birth. They're still having multiple ailments, and there was this huge gap of how we have targets as a health facility to deliver services, yet our community is moving, and we are, within a brick and mortar facility. And that was I'd encountered community health workers before. I always saw them as a good add-on, but this was the setting where it hit me that they actually were such a critical pillar to the health delivery service. And so, again, they're working in the hospitals, supporting big infrastructure projects. With there's such a high maternal mortality rate, so working on building of a theatre so that we can help deliver patients. There's such a high malnutrition rate among children, and so together with partners again, being able to build pediatric wards. And the lesson I learned that was even they are the citizens of the country, right? And like government reaches them. And I say this because, it's easy when you're in the urban setting in the cities to ignore the role of government because you have so many alternatives, right? But there are settings where even private sector will not show up because really there's no economic case to be made. But even there, government is still there. Government is still mandated to deliver services. And I saw not just the breadth of government, but the depth of government to be able to reach each citizen and deliver services. And to make sure that facilities work. And so in Githongo, over a 2-year financial period, we were able to double the income of the hospital, the FIF, Facility Improvement Fund, which is basically what we generate, without increasing the prices for services, because of course those prices are government mandated, but just being, again to your point, using creativity and using innovative ways to be able to increase the number of patients who are coming and improve our services. And so then going to Garbatula, really thinking about increasing access. And so from there, my boss, Dr. Mboro, who again was so instrumental in my career and growth in policy, planning, strategy, and health system strengthening, encouraged me and said, look, you're doing all these things around health system strengthening and health policy, as you think about specializing, what's that area? And I was very clear in my mind I didn't want to do a clinical master's, and I thought, okay, I really enjoy this idea around improving efficiencies in the health systems and availing resources for services. And so I was really drawn to the health financing and policy space. And so through the government, was able to get a scholarship to Australia for 2 years to do my master's in health economics and policy. And in as much as I had been in leadership positions, looking back now with the knowledge and exposure I have, I understand that I was oscillating between a leader and a manager, But the Australia Awards for Africa and the Leadership Awards for Africa in 2012 was that opportunity and was that grounding point of me understanding the true difference between management and leadership. So after the award, came back in 2013, 2014, I want to say. At the time the evolution was happening, I was now a qualified health economist, and so again, based on my performance in Githongo and Garbatula, there's also a number of incidences that have happened in that journey. And so at that time, I already knew the Director of Medical Services, Dr. Kimani. We'd had a few run-ins, positive and also not so many positive. And when I came for my posting, he essentially said, someone with your medical background and your new skill sets in health economics and policy would be really valuable for us here at the headquarters level in Afia House to think through a number of things. Because again, at that time, 2013, 2014, I think, the conversation on universal health coverage had already started, and there were all these things around how do we start implementing universal health services. Those were the free maternity services that had been rolled out. And there was a need for those skill sets. So served a year at national headquarters, and I very quickly learned that in as much as I was able to be very effective at the sub-national level, because at that level, at that time, it was one government, and so when you were given your area, you essentially were a decision maker. You were able to make decisions, you were able to budget for money, you were able to deploy money, and because I have a very strong value system according to my standard, you're able to identify loopholes and be able to tie them. At the national level, I would say that there are many things that happened that were not aligned to my values, and in as much as I had made my decision that I wanted to stay in government for a very long time, I had never envisioned myself ever transitioning out of government because of the challenges to my value system. I chose to walk away I realized that I may not be able to make the changes that I needed, and I did not want to continuously be exposed to the value issues that I was being exposed to. And I also realized that staying there to make the difference would come at a very high cost that I was not willing to pay. And so that was another lesson for me in terms of, we all are change makers, and we all have opportunities every day to make changes. I've learned to choose my battles. I've learned to determine what battle I'm willing to fight and what battle I'm not willing to fight. And it is one aspect of it that's an ability issue, that can I actually fight this battle? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes. But just because you can doesn't mean you have to. And for me at that time, it didn't make sense for me to stay in government. And so at that time, at the national headquarters is actually when I got the opportunity to be a Mandela Washington Fellowship 2014. That's where we met with you, Rachel, and a whole bunch of amazing people. We were the guinea pig cohort. So there are many highs of the program, and also, areas that I'm sure have been improved since the very first inaugural cohort. And again, for me, this was really helpful in my decision making later on, because then I realized that actually some of the challenges I was facing while I was here in Kenya working with government are challenges that were shared across so many colleagues on the continent, and I was able to form a very strong community with the alumni from that cohort. But I also realized that I actually can apply my skill sets beyond Kenya, and that informed my transition out of government from being a civil servant to actually advising governments on health system strengthening and health financing and policy. And so that was the beginning of me transitioning out and taking up multiple roles in advising government. Yeah. So for me, the fellowship was quite critical as well, because again, if you talk about defining factors, there's a defining factor around staying in government and serving. There's a defining factor around the Australia Leadership Awards for Africa, when I learned that I needed to fully move into leadership and not just, oscillate between managing and leadership. And so the Mandela Washington Fellowship in 2014 was a defining moment because of a number of things. One, again, I met, my cohort was mostly around health people and health people from the public sector. And so amazing people from across the entire continent. And I learned that, one, that in as much as we are a very diverse continent and there are different countries and there are different challenges in different countries, there are also a lot of similarities in some of the challenges we're facing, especially for those who are in government. So that was really an eye-opener, because that made me realize, okay, what I'm doing here in Kenya could actually be of value to multiple countries and multiple colleagues across the continent. The second thing I learned was that young people are amazing and they continue to do amazing things. And there is an opportunity and a responsibility to provide a platform for young people to contribute. And so for me, again, meeting young people and also realizing that, okay, hey, young people have always been, have leadership potential. They're not the leaders of the future. They're the leaders now, and they're also the leaders in the future. And the fact that this fellowship recognized and provided an opportunity for young people to not just be exposed to each other and form a community, but also to challenge them to think bigger, more broadly, and understand their regional landscape and their global landscape was really helpful for me. And that was a value from the fellowship. The third was that the vision, planning and having a vision is so important. And I think back to His Excellency, Barack Obama, and trying to figure out, he knew where he came from, and he recognized that despite of where he was in his journey, and he had the vision of recognizing that not everyone had similar opportunities and privileges, and trying to figure out, it's a thing of, you let down the ladder, how do I provide opportunities for other high potential Africans, young Africans. And I don't even believe that where the fellowship program is today, how many fellows are there today, may have been part of the vision, right? And in terms of, he may have had a vision of, this is what I want to do, and maybe we'll end up maybe 100 or 200, and now I believe we're in the thousands. His vision has impacted thousands during his time as a leader of the nation, and even after his time as a leader of the nation. And so for me, it also taught me the power of vision, and the impact that vision can have, even beyond your presence there as the vision and the mission driver, right? You can leave, but because the vision has been bought and the vision has had impact, that others will continue building out that legacy, even if you have not been present throughout. So that was really helpful for me for the fellowship. And then coming back, I mean, just having that, not just a cohort that we were spending time with in the US, but also just coming back and having the community. And there are people, even from the cohort, that, how we've kept in touch, till today, Of course, people dissipate, people have different paths in life, that's the truth of life, but there are still people who I hold really closely, are very close friends of mine, till today, through the fellowship. So again, they have continued to form part of my support system, even despite of where my journey has taken me. So the fellowship was quite good, and I like the fact that there's also the landing in the vision and the fellowship, right? So initially it was just the Mandela Washington Fellowship, but then there was a realization that you're only taking 25, 30 people, to the US, yet thousands of people have applied. And so I do think that, again, the thinking about what can we do for the rest of people who are high potential, but they couldn't, and they qualified to be in this cohort, but there just weren't enough resources and spaces, and the idea around the regional leadership centers and providing opportunities even there is a good lesson and takeaway from the fellowship, that the vision can evolve, and that doesn't invalidate the vision, but also giving room for dreams to grow and change and modify is really the stuff that life and adulthood is made of. When I made my decision to quit, because I was like, okay, I drew the line in the sand, and I was like, God, this line has been crossed, I will not stay. At that time, again, and this is, God is so just in time. He takes his time, but he's never late. He's just in time. So I'd mentally made my decision to resign from government. Now remember, I had gone on a government scholarship to Australia, and so I had a bond. And so what I did was I said, you know what, I'm resigning, but I want to resign well. So now I had to get money, find money to pay back the government for the scholarship I got. So it was a hard decision, because most people are like, you've already done a year, just white knuckle it, do a year, finish your bond, then to resign. But I was like, no, I mean, you need to know where your line is, and when it's crossed, it's crossed. Like this thing of going back and forth, maybe I can survive, and again I would say, yeah, if I really white knuckle, I mean, I survived in Gamba too, I could have survived staying in government for an extra year, but for me I was thinking, what's the cost, and was I willing? And I realized I wasn't willing, so I had to look for resources to pay the government back for its bond. And then most people are like, why are you paying the government back? Just leave. Not everyone pays their bond. I'm like, no, but just because people don't see it, it pays to do the right thing, to have clean hands in whatever context that you can. And so at that time when I was leaving, McKinsey & Company was setting up what was called then the Africa Delivery Hub. It was meant to be their exclusive arm that serves African governments and social sector clients exclusively, so no private sector work. And so, got connected, and they interviewed me and asked me to join them to help. Again, this was a new thing. We're building out a new kind of way of working, and I was able to join the team, and I was there for a few years as well, and that again was an opportunity for me, because again, remember, I'd never dreamt not working in government, And so the idea that I could still work in private sector but serve governments exclusively was so attractive to me, because then I had the opportunity of being in a private sector entity, and not just any private sector entity, the global number one management consulting firm. So I had proper private sector exposure in terms of seeing how private sector organization works, culture, all that, like everything that comes with private sector, especially at that level. But also my client was exclusively government and social sector, and that helped me stay true to my area of interest. And I keep saying, you can have a dream and a vision, but you have to be open to how that dream and vision evolves, because I still serve government. I'm not in government, I am serving government. And so I stayed in McKinsey & Company for a few years, and it was wonderful. That was the opportunity I had to live in so many countries across the continent. I lived in West Africa, I lived in Southern Africa, I lived in East Africa, I lived in so many countries during those years. And there's something around it really, because I traveled a lot, but this idea of I literally am living in this country for a year. Every day I wake up and I'm interacting beyond my office. I'm interacting with local people from their country, understand their context. Was so helpful for me, because I also again began to understand the African landscape, the governments across the continent, the similarities and the differences and the challenges that governments are facing. Again, the same message kept coming home, that governments can work for their people. They don't always do, but if there is an entity that has the potential to have depth of impact, it's the government. But there's also that lesson that kept being reinforced around that leadership is important. Leadership is so important. And no, leadership is nothing, but leadership is everything. And both statements are true, right? It's in a team, it's no longer about the rockstar leader, it's about a team working together. But the truth is, where the organization will go, where the country will go, is so highly dependent on the type of leader you give the privilege to serve you. And so it was wonderful being in that setting, being able to live and work in West Africa, live and work in Eastern Africa, live and work in Southern Africa, and to serve governments across. And not just I loved it as well because again, I'd spent my career until then in the health sector, but then at McKinsey & Company I got exposed to so many sectors. I mean, I did work in education, I did work in agriculture, I did work in energy and power, I did work in infrastructure, I did work in tourism, I did work across so many key sector pillars of development, and that also helped my mindset shift from not just health as this is something good to do to support people, but more around health as part of the development sector, that it was just beyond offering services. It was about making sure people are healthy and they can thrive and they can contribute to the growth of a country in different ways. So it was a good time. There's something to be said around, if you're going to learn, try and learn from the best that you can. And I believe especially around some of the analytical toolkits, there's no better place I could have learned some of those skill sets. But like I said, by the time I was joining the company, I'd worked for a number of years. I'd worked, I think, for 7 years or something. I had led teams, led budgets. I'd already grown to a strategic level of leadership. And so, specifically for my leadership journey, I perceived that there was more I could do, and I may not necessarily have had the patience to wait to grow through the ranks, right? Because again, if you look at the history of the company and who they classically hired to be consultants, it was people just straight out of grad school, who they give skills and they get an opportunity to shape those people. I had already been shaped for 7 years with different experiences, and so I perceived that I was able to offer much more, and I was not willing to necessarily wait for the opportunity to be able to do much more. Second was because I was self-aware. I already knew very early on during my time there that I wasn't actually planning on staying for a long time. I always knew my strategy from. By the first time I was there, within the first 3 months, I knew my plan is to grow, but I'm not going to grow internally. Like, I'll grow outwards. And I think the second thing, as I mentioned earlier, mentors are so important. And I've had amazing mentors who've been with me for decades now. The people who have walked my journey for the last 10, 15 years. They know me. And there's something to be said about people who know you, who you are at the core, your values, and who have faith in your skill, who have faith in who you are and what you're able to do, even when you yourself cannot see that. I would say that my mentors were so instrumental in me understanding how long to stay, and also understanding that I can leave and I'll be fine and I'll be able to get an opportunity. And by the time I'd made the decision to leave, I already had a number of offers to join entities that I thought were brilliant and were aligned with my values, aligned with what I wanted to do. It wouldn't, God has to make life interesting, right? So I had been interviewing for a couple of roles, because honestly, I wouldn't say that I had the idea of, okay, I want to build something from scratch, right? So I'd been interviewing for a couple of roles, and in the process of interviewing, I came across two things. I came across a publication that was done in 2015 around the investment case for community health workers. And so as I was reading about that publication, I was like, oh yeah, actually, I remember community health workers from my time in Gabriel, and I was like, yeah, this makes sense. I think community health workers should be part of the system. And then as I was, just in the market, seeing what was available, I come across, I get put in contact with some alumni of the company, and I had some conversations, and they're like, hey, we actually are the ones who wrote the report that you read, and we've been trying to figure out how do we set up an entity that can advise governments on health and health financing more broadly, specifically on the role of community health systems in strengthening care on the continent, and how health can become part of the development agenda. And I was having conversations with them. I thought, yeah, I can build this thing. Why not? Of course I can build. And in my head I thought, okay, again, like I mentioned when I joined McKinsey and Company, the Africa Delivery Hub was being built, and so it was a hub within an entity, but there were still things to be like there are elements of building. So I thought, oh yeah, it's why not? I've been part of building something before. I can build something else. I know how to recruit. I know how to do a number of things. I know how about branding. I know about so many things. So I thought, I can do it. They're transferable skill sets. I definitely had overestimated the transferable skill sets, because of course when you're building a new unit within an existing 100-plus-year-old entity, there are things that you're not starting from scratch in many ways. And so, and there's something to be said about being somewhere in your career and then you find that you have a blank canvas, right? And it's about, this is the issue area that we're trying to solve. This is a problem we're trying to solve. And then it's literally, you have to think about, okay, how are we going to solve it? But also I realized that this was a fantastic opportunity because, like I said, I'm pluripotent in many ways. I'm very interested in many things. My ultimate vision is around young people and women being really involved in the development of the continent. And so I thought, okay, the way I'll build this is not just about how do we solve for health financing on the continent, how do we solve for community health system, but I'll try and bring a convergence of all my passions in one thing. which is a double-edged sword for sure. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to build this, I want to build it, and I want to make sure I can hire young people. I want to hire women. I want to hire Africans. I want to build a global entity that is, it's truly local, like it's a local entity. We are building it from Africa, but it's going to be global in terms of being able to be globally positioned, globally exposed, globally competitive, global standards, global everything. I also told myself, okay, fine, international development at that time was not very diverse, and I said I want to be able to be part of creating a pipeline of leadership into global development, so that people then learn skills and end up taking multiple leadership roles within global development, and increase the diversity within global development. I could not. The vision was clear, right? The vision was clear. We're going to help governments scale up community health systems on the continent. We're going to support them getting money, and the people who are going to do this are going to be young, predominantly women, predominantly African team members who will do that for governments. We have grown in leaps and bounds in so many ways. So much growth, so many mistakes, so many things that have the things that worked out way better than I could ever have imagined. And there are so many balls that have been dropped and fumbled in that growth. I could never have imagined we'd be where we are now, 7 years in. And I know that even the next 7, regardless of who's leading the entity, that a strong foundation is being built for an entity that will be relevant for a very long time. And so I'm also very vocal around both the glory and the gory of leadership, because again, we always talk about leadership in such a narrow lens, and everyone wants to be a leader because they see the titles, they see the awards, they see the coverage, they see the platforms, but they don't see the lack of sleep, right? They don't see the sacrifice, they don't see the missed events, they don't see the fights that you fight that people will never know about. There's so many fights and battles are fought that my team will never know about our existence, about people thinking that, we are young, what do we know, we have no expertise, we should not have access, the kind of access to governments that we have. There's so many fights I've fought around, people talking about competence, or people saying we don't have the years of experience, or, there's so many people who've come and told me, hey, your team member is someone I taught in university, and now they're the ones who are beside me in doing the work we do, The continent is a wonderful place, but it's ageist, right? And the Bible says, do not let people despise you because of your youth. And I really encourage people to be willing to step forward and take the risk. And there's so much you can offer. And young people have and continue to do amazing things. They just need the platforms, they need the spaces. I also want to be very honest that there are people who you will give the platform and the spaces and they will not step up. They will not show up. They will live down to the expectations of others. And there's a lot of disappointment that comes with leadership. And as someone who's built something, one of the big disappointments is after all you've done to raise money, to get clients, to make relationships, all these things, when you give someone an opportunity, when they don't show up the way they're supposed to, they don't show up based on their potential, either because of internal or external limiting factors, it can break your heart. It can. And again, mentors are so important because I do think that people in my network who are self-made billionaires, who have built entities, and have been able to, help me navigate very difficult situations. So when you look at the health system and the way it's been built, we, on the continent, majority of our illnesses are preventable, but we focus on building a system that waits for you to get ill, and then your interaction comes when you're ill, that you're able to get the services. And actually that makes, that then means that you only seek services when you're ill, and by the time you're seeking services, you're already badly off. And then the health facility may not have everything that you need, either the worker or the supplies. And then it's more expensive to offer the services when you're already ill, as opposed to preventing you to becoming ill. And so at the Financing Alliance for Health, we are transforming health systems to be more responsive to the burden of disease on the continent. And we recognize that one of the reasons why systems are not being responsive is because the financing required to transform those health systems and to extend healthcare from a health facility level to the household level are limited. And so the role of the team, the Financing Alliance for Health, is to support and advise governments on healthcare financing more broadly, and specifically on primary and community healthcare financing, so that we can be able to support governments understand that there's a case for investment, and make that case, mobilize their own resources on budget towards putting the systems to play, and then be able to get money from other partners who work alongside government to invest in health systems. What that actually looks like is, we embed team members across multiple countries, across multiple governments. And when we embed the team members, they work day to day with the governments to develop strategies and policies, to contribute to the changes in law that allow governments to pay community health workers. Then we develop investment cases, we support governments to secure their own domestic resources, and then we also design financing products and approaches so that governments can be able to mobilize money from private sector, from donors, from the UN bodies like the World Bank, and from, of course, bilaterals, philanthropy, and everyone, so that they can be able to build these systems in country and take them to scale. We work at systems level, and I do think that one of the lessons I learned from working in government was that there's a system that already exists for delivering of health services and also keeping people well, and that people avoid working at the systems level because it's complicated, right? The system has different levels. You can only focus on one level because that's already wide enough, and then you can't fully account for all the impact you'll have when you work at system level. And what people want is to make sure that they're able to say, we did this activity and these are the results, right, to your question. And that's around direct impact. But the truth is, when you think about it, working at systems makes sure that, one, you work at scale. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and especially when the government is your primary and exclusive client. There are already inbuilt challenges there, but the truth is you can get to a scale that no other player per se can compete in most cases. And then there's something to do with sustainability, because these other systems we build in the non-government sector or in other areas are very highly dependent on the funding cycle. And if there's something I've learned is, in principle, government stays. Partners will come and go, private sector will come and go. Government as an entity, not the people in government, but the government as an entity, will stay in a country for a very long time. And so we've been in operation for now 7 years. And through our work, we've been able to support directly, which is, of course, attributable to our team directly, but also as part of an ecosystem, so contributed to an ecosystem where we've been able to, either through our direct work, our knowledge, our evidence, our advocacy, been able to mobilize more than $300 million on government budgets for community health systems. We've been able to influence a lot of resources as well from partners, and for example, with the Africa Frontline First, which is a collaborative effort with other partners, we were able to design $100 million catalytic fund that's going to create 200,000 community health worker jobs on the continent. So that's again a job and a development agenda. We've been able to create spaces for more than 100,000 community health worker jobs in policies and plans, and in actuality we've been able to support countries to pay these workers. Again, many countries are on their journey there, but a number of the countries we've been part of that journey, and we can say that we have directly contributed to securing of domestic budget lines for that. And what that actually means is that I'm seated here, and I know an auntie of mine who has diabetes in the village, and there's going to be a community health worker who will be able to go to my auntie's house and check on her and make sure that she's taking her meds and her sugar is going to be okay. That auntie may never know about the policy at the national level, may never know the role that our team has played in that bigger system. We'll never know how our team in collaboration with so many other partners have come together to make sure that that auntie can get her sugar tracked in her house, that she may not always have to leave her house, to make sure that she's well, to make sure that the lady who gave birth in a hospital and has gone home and is still bleeding can be told by someone, oh, this bleeding is a bit too much, maybe you need to go back to hospital and be checked. It could be about a gentleman who has been woke up and had fever, but can't go to the hospital because of the queues, and they are a daily worker, right? And so and by the time they come back from their daily hustle, maybe the local health center is already closed. Now they're able to have a community health worker come to their home and be able to test them for malaria, and in some countries be able to to refer them to the facility so that they can get the malaria drugs. That's what it means. People think policy is high level, it happens at the government, and what does it have to do with people in the community? But actually, it has everything to do with people in the community. And it makes me happy that my life will mean something. Reflecting, and I'm so proud of the fact that there have been around 80 people who've walked through the doors of the organization. Some have stayed, some have left. Some, the fellowship program is for a specific period of time, and many have left to play again some of the leadership roles in some of these other entities. And I'm so proud of that, because majority of those people are young people. Majority of those people are Africans. Majority of those people are women. So I'm still living my life's mission. So the vision is very clear, and I'm stubborn on the vision, but I've been able to live the vision in different ways and through different opportunities. Where do I see myself in 10 years? Again, I'm stubborn on vision. I am flexible on process. I know whatever I'll be doing, it'll be around supporting young people and women to contribute to the development of the continent and the world, and really honing in on leadership. Honing in on leadership. In 2015, I already began to develop my own leadership and development practice and my coaching business. I qualified as an executive coach, and I've been supporting people in their leadership and development journeys for many years. Of course, my day job takes a lot of my time, and there's lots of travel. But it has given me immense joy to work alongside, 5-10 people every year and see how that journey has helped them. And for me, again, the vision will always be, what can I do? What more can I do for young people, for Africans, for women, to contribute to development? So I know that, again, I'll still be in this space one way or another. I perceive I'll be doing more of the leadership work and really building that pipeline, not just for the continent, but on a more global stage. I've spent the last 15 years interacting with African governments. I know a thing or two about African governments. I may not always be in a role that I am directly interfacing with them. That one I know for sure. There's only so much resilience one person can have. But I know that that knowledge should not go to waste, and I will definitely seek opportunities that can make the best use of that knowledge. I'm really keen on strengthening systems, talking about and taking solutions to scale. Not everything has to scale, but I have worked at scale and I've understood a few things about how to take things to scale, and also, of course, sustainability longer term. And so I do see myself playing a strong role in the leadership and governance sectors on system scale and sustainability of development sectors. Like I said, in McKinsey, I did health. I've spent a lot of time now in my current role more in hardcore finance and investments field. But I understand agriculture, I understand education, I understand tourism, I understand the energy sector quite well as well. And so seeing how I can contribute to all those sectors and not just exclusively health is potentially somewhere I'll find myself within the next 10 years. You need to have the right mindset and attitude. You cannot come and engage a government already thinking governments are corrupt. Government is full of incompetent people. Government, they see it, they smell it, they know it. They can see it in you, right? And so having the right mindset and attitude around, I strongly believe governments can work for people. I believe I served in one of the best governments that ever existed under His Excellency Emilio Kibaki. And I saw what we were able to do as a government in this country. And so that's the image of government I have in my mind. Every other day I meet governments that don't always live up to that image. But there are also governments I've gone to and countries I've gone to where governments have blown my mind in a very positive way. And so I know the potential of government. And so I always go with that open slate, non-judgmental, because we are demand-driven. And so when a government approaches us and asks us to serve them, it's what do you want done and how can we support you? And beginning with the assumption that the people in that space want to work for the people. Along the journey, they may show you otherwise, but have the right mindset and attitude. So that has helped me. What has helped me work with governments and different governments for a very long time is the understanding of the system. And when we talk about government system, people always think, oh, the system is amorphous, or the system is a people. The system, people are part of the system, but there's actually a system, right? People are part of it, and there are processes, procedures are another part of the system. And if you don't understand the government system and how it works, you will consistently be frustrated. And understanding the difference within government systems in Anglophone Africa and Francophone Africa and Lusophone Africa, understanding perverse incentives within the systems. Again, these are things that you learn over time, and you're able to see some of the signal. So the third thing is resilience and patience. A conversation can either take a day, a week, or 10 years. You can't lose hope very quickly. People come to government with a very private sector mindset. Oh, we're going to do this, and then, oh, we'll go have a meeting with the government, get approval in a month, we're going to do this. And then because it's not taking a month, it's taking 2 months, taking 3 months, people get frustrated out of the system. Have a very long-term mindset. And that's why I perceive, again, knowing that in systems change, it takes time, and you're working at scale. And the thing about working at scale, I think is it a bamboo tree? That the first few years you see nothing. You're like, ooh, I was sold fake seeds. And then in the 3rd, 4th year, you see a short seedling. And then in a very incredibly short span of time, you see so much change. And my experience of working with governments has been that, you'll pump a lot of resources, people, time, money up front, and then things take much longer than you anticipate. So you have to build in buffer time. You have to build in buffer time engaging with government. But when change happens, it happens at a scale that few other sectors can make. You have to have money cannot be your main motivating factor. I say this because there's always someone who, private sector, other sector, who is willing to add the zeros, add more commas to your compensation. And working with governments it can get frustrating. But for me, if you're very impact minded, and you can have impact in all sectors, don't get me wrong, but because I've understood government and understood the reach and depth of government, again, like I said, if someone somewhere will end up with receiving services at their home, that's part of my legacy. And I'm okay if they never know that I existed. I'm okay if they never know the entity existed. I'm okay if the entity, the team, myself never get that credit, but the fact that means the world to that person, that's what is most important to me. And that's my motivating factor. And the last thing is find your sphere of influence and do your very best there. I've learned that as well in government. Don't choose your battles. Try not to bite off more than you can chew. Choose what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. Because the need can be large and you can be tempted to be like, oh, we can do this and we can also do this and we can also, and then it's like you spread yourself too thin, you burn yourself out in so many ways. I don't want to be a jack of all trades per se in this sector. I've decided we're going to be a master of one. We're going to be a master of health, financing and investment. That's it. That could look so differently in different countries, but that's our laser focus. And that helps us get more experience and be focused on the impact there. And I have such strong belief that if God rose one person, he will rise a multitude. And he will raise a multitude to serve. And so if I just do my best in this sphere of influence, even though there is need there and there and there, the same God is faithful enough to raise someone in that same context, and then we all do our best. And that's why I strongly believe in these fellowships and many other fellowships, to your point, that exist, that invest so much in individuals, because it's the individuals that come together to form the critical mass. And it's that critical mass that will cause change. But that doesn't negate the change and impact that an individual can have. It just means that with a critical mass, you have a support system and you're working towards a similar goal. Contrary to popular belief, leadership is a very personal journey that manifests publicly. Many people focus on the public side of leadership. What I've learned over time, and I continue to learn, is the hardest person I've had to lead is myself. I'm the hardest person I have had to lead. And I say this because, one, you need to know your why. You don't have to be honest to everyone, but you have to be honest to yourself. Why? Why do I want to be a leader? Why do I want to do this? Because your why is going to be so important. So for me, leadership is so core to my ikigai that I can't live my purpose without leadership. And so I also recognize that leadership is a journey, and there's a phase of leadership where I will need to lead over a team and an organization, and there's a phase of leadership where it'll be more internal looking as opposed to the external impact. But I know leadership is core to my purpose and my reason for being. So know your why. Second is there's a glory and there's a glory of leadership. Leadership is sacrifice. Like, no one ever tell you anything. It is sacrifice. You will give more than you ever wanted to, and the sooner you come to terms with that, the better. It's important that your why is not really only focused on the glory. That there will be a glory, and accept that in advance. I would say that's the second thing. The third is, I strongly believe that we've all been called to lead ourselves. Not everyone should have the privilege to serve as a leader of our team or an organization. And again, everyone's like, oh, everyone, like, and that's why I also push back against cultures that are, up or out, and, the career ladder, because there's an assumption that you have to keep going up. And there are people who are actually meant to be really good and stay at a technical level. There's a challenge in having managers occupy leadership roles. And you may not recognize that challenge when it's at middle level, but the minute you have managers at executive level, people who only know how to manage as opposed to lead, you lose vision, you can't drive to mission. And so, again, truly interrogate, are you actually meant to be a leader of a team people and of our organization? And there's so many tools that are available publicly that can help you understand that. I would encourage people to understand that, people, again, and something I struggled with in 2018, 19. I wasn't happy. The gory was too much. I was tired. I was burnt out. I was sacrificing too much. There's so many things I did not sign up for in leadership, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And again, the value of fellowships, I was able to go for the Tutu Fellowship. And one of the things Sean Lance and Peter Wilson mentioned was, leadership is not about being happy. It's about being fulfilled. Because you have explored your full potential of what you could be and who you could become. And if you've been called to serve as a leader, it's not an easy journey, and you may not, in essence, emotionally be happy, but you'll be fulfilled, and that is worth it. Another thing I'd tell leaders who are coming into the space, it doesn't always get easier. You just get better at it. I wouldn't say that transitioning people out of the team is easy. I've been a leader for 15 years. I have had to transition many people out of the team. No one builds a team to get rid of people. It doesn't get easier, but you get better at it in terms of learning the skill and how to be intentional. And I would say just jump in. You can read all the books, you can do all the fellowships, you can do all the courses, and I encourage people to do it. But you know how you lead? By leading. Step in, start. Be a manager, read a book, do a course, get better. It's a skill, and it's an art, and it's a science. The science is the knowledge, the courses, and the tips. The art is in the practicing of leadership. Jump in, stay at it. In due season, it shall come to pass. And I will definitely say that I have always reflected on the fact that, where are the leaders like Kwame Nkrumah? Where are the leaders like Patrice Lumumba? Where are these leaders who had such a vision for the continent? Julius Nyerere, so many who had such a vision for the continent and were so instrumental in the continent getting independence from colonialism. Where is that type of leader today? Who are those? Who will be those leaders? Now, I know myself. I've worked in government long enough to know that I will not take political leadership. It's not my my path. But there are those who are built for that path. Have the courage to step in. Have the courage not to give up. Have the courage to believe. Have the courage to be in the journey. But don't assume that you will accomplish your purpose just because you are at your destination. Even in the journey of keeping to stand up and not getting the votes and not being elected and going to the next level and still not being elected, you are learning so much there, and there's so much impact you're having there. I don't think I've reached my destination. I don't think I've fully lived out my purpose. But my life has, to the extent that I believe, it has been impactful. I may have more impact in the next decade than I've had in the last 3-4 decades. But that doesn't negate the fact that I've had impact. And so I would encourage young people to step in, show up. And when you have the opportunity, when you've been given that seat at the table, or you fought for that seat at the table, make it count. Make it count. Use your voice, use your agency, and create space for other people. It's not just about you. Create the spaces for other people to be there with you, and provide the pathway for them to not just be there with you, but also to be able to take the mantle and go. Because my understanding of leadership and some certain types of leadership is that it's a marathon in terms of the distance that you're running, but it's a really race, right? I have my part to play and I'll play it well, but I have to pass the baton to someone else, and then they have their part to play and they have to play it well. And so some of the people who are being hesitant with leadership are the people who we're meant to pass the baton to, and they're not stepping up. Yet we've run our race, right? We've finished our season, we've done our part. Even Moses died and Joshua had to rise. If Joshua did not rise, Moses was not going to take the Israelites to Canaan. Though that was his vision, he never got to step to the promised land.